Hey, thanks for tuning in to Between the Lines podcast. I'm Alex Woods, a former ICU nurse and founder of U.S. Legal Nurse Consultants. This show uses medical legal cases to explore judgment, strategy, and decision making. But what we're really talking about is how people think when there isn't a clear answer. The stories come from medicine and law right now, but the patterns, the missteps, and the strategy, it applies everywhere. This is about reading between the lines and knowing what to do with what you find. So let's get into it. So we'll go straight into it. I'm excited to learn more about you and really take some highlight key points and share it with LinkedIn, share it with other attorneys, and yeah, just go from there. I'm excited. Damon, first tell me what first drew you into med mal personal injury law?
I think some mistakes I made is really what got me there first. And so I think I kind of prestige chased or was looking for a job at a big firm or something that looked cool. And so first 2 summers of law school, I worked at a defense firm. Didn't like it. I think looking back, I don't think I liked it either time. And then I got a job out of law school at a defense firm. And I was like, this could be great. This is a great opportunity. It got me to the city where I live in. So that was good. But after about a year, things were not going well. I didn't have a good relationship with the bosses. I didn't like the work. I didn't know, frankly, what the hell to do next. Like I wasn't sure, like what I do now. I'm like, okay, these are all the things. But any next step, I felt like I had to ask permission to send an email. I had to ask permission to contact a client. I had to ask permission to just about everything except for leaving at the end of the day and going to the bathroom. I was pretty much asking for permission for them. And so at one point they were kind of like, "It's probably best that we're gonna give you a month and maybe you can get things together or you should look elsewhere." And so which, I appreciate at least. I guess they could have just cut the cord. And so started applying to jobs and I was in an interview for a place that was more general. And they said, "We've never done plaintiffs work before. And what do you think about that?" And first time I had really thought about it, right? I went to a red state law school where plaintiffs work didn't exist. And so I had never and I, in that moment, it was like it hit me like something. It hasn't been working the other time, so I'd like to try something where I actually help people, which is why I went to law school. I jumped into that, and then pretty quickly figured out that I had been approaching it the entire time, and the real prestige was in getting to help clients out and getting to help people and fight for people. And like I said, I stumbled into it, doing the wrong thing over and over until I finally went, oh, now and then. So I've been doing plaintiff's work since.
Oh, that's cool. That's a really cool story. Everybody's story is different, and I like that. You did the wrong thing until you found the right thing. That's cool.
On accident. I don't, but that's not like I did something
Right.
great.
I think that's how most of like the most profound, impactful stories are, though. It's something led me to something else and it wasn't purposeful, but this is where I'm at. Can you walk us through one of the most complex cases you've worked on and what made it challenging, legally, medically, or both?
So I think that right any time the medicine starts to get heavy, it's more complicated, not because first off, I can't approach it assuming that I'm going to understand it better than a practitioner. But like I think of the first time I had to really learn like troponin scores and how that impacts a stroke. And I couldn't talk to you as well as I could at the time, but I was like getting educated by experts on this client they had assumed tiny ischemic strokes, or instead they had assumed those were the issue and they totally missed a heart attack, killed our client. And so first off, it was complicated just because the nature of it, that we're sitting there with a bunch of different things that I couldn't have talked about a week before I learned about them. And so putting that information together. And then at the same point, we the matter was complicated because there are a number of defendants, and I frankly was new, right? I didn't know how to create pressure. And so some of it was waiting for guidance on that and learning maybe what I consider now not the way I would handle things. And then two, it was also the context of this client had died. So there's this greater complexity because I always wish for a case to be small. And when I say a case is small, you call me, got in a car accident, you go to the doctor a couple times. That's it. I would much rather have you like people like, oh, that's a big case, right? It's like, do you want it to be? And so I always like the complexity. Client passed away from this, and so the those things always create a greater complexity. I had a client once who almost died, and the best thing is at the end of the case is that I got to bring them the check. And I told them, and we're sitting there all together crying and just so thankful. And we were able to resolve this case. But that case, like that, I think of that case I'm talking about as my biggest case, whereas this more complex one is more complex just because you have all these other complexities of somebody's lives, right? There is not, we tell people that when you get hurt, there's never a sum of money to justify me hitting you with a car or somebody hitting you with a car. And there's really never a sum of money to justify someone dying because of those things or because of medical malpractice. And I think that those always, right, you're playing with monopoly money in a degree that like it's never gonna justify it for an injury, but it really doesn't make everything make sense because of a death.
Yeah.
So medicine, new to the case, and then also just this large complexity of this grave loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we do mostly medical malpractice, and we've done quite a few wrongful deaths. We do a lot of like high stake cases. There's quite a few right now that are still haven't settled or trial or anything like that. So I can't give too many details, but
Sure.
there's some cases that are basically our attorney clients say, hey, listen, we want you to identify any kind of theories of liability, possible negligence, because obviously we work more on the medical side and what we lay the groundwork for you guys. So there's a lot of times where they're either I have a gut feeling about this case or the damages are really high. Let's investigate a little further and see if there's something
Mhm.
that could have gone wrong. And some of these cases are 8,000 pages. One of the cases, they're all challenging, even for a medically trained person, even for me being surgically trauma ICU nurse.
Sure.
So when you're looking at these records too, you're literally trying to build a story of what happened just by reading words on a paper. And none of these things scream out on paper at you. And so you're literally connecting the dots and you're trying to find obviously causation. Obviously, that's one of the most
Sure.
debatable parts of a med mal case, proving causation. But for us, it's hey, listen, we can find multiple things that contributed to the injury, and then we give it to you guys that way. But for the provider failing to follow up on this imaging, the client would have had, or the perforation would have been identified way earlier. Septic shock probably wouldn't have happened. Have you
Do you
found
do you
that in
feel
your experience?
sometimes I'll have a case like I have plenty of cases where they miss they'll a video will just no longer exist and or like, I'm looking at this thing I know there were more records of a case and I'm like and I don't think it's a med mal like sometimes it is 100% that they don't give a damn about sending medical records and so they don't try to
Yeah.
and so they whatever company they've hired to do it is bad and so like I have a case where I'm like I'm missing medical records for I have the bills there must be records
Yeah.
but so like in that but so yes I do see it but like in that shift so going from like the high stakes high intensity what do you feel like the challenges are like going to it's not the stakes aren't high but they are you can take a little bit of time on a decision as a consultant whereas like before it was like you had to be pretty rapid right.
Oh, yeah, like in the trauma surgical ICU. But it is interesting because I always try to put myself in in the story and because it's super easy to evaluate these in hindsight and been like, this should have been done, this should have been done, this should have been done. And I always tell my team too, and like other legal nurses, I'm like, listen, you have to be careful of hindsight bias. I said, because you will lead the attorney the wrong way because they did a lot of the times the staff, they did what they knew or did what they did with what information they had. So it's easy to look back and be like, look how everything escalated or look how everything
Hmm.
compounded. And that happens though. But what did they know at the time? What information did they have at the time? And did they act on that information? There are like what the records don't tell are probably more important than what they do. And just because, and I've had this talk with some attorneys too, just because it wasn't documented doesn't mean it didn't happen. But then you look at the client and you're like, it obviously did not happen. It went from this to this 12 hours, and you can tell that nothing was done. Vitals weren't obtained, labs weren't ordered, or labs weren't obtained like they should have been, and it just escalates. And it's just crazy what story you have to build from what the record
Sure.
as well. Sorry, I could go on and on about cases.
No, it's crazy how much I didn't learn this until I had a kid, and not even from work. But it's crazy to me how much more medicine, in my opinion, is way more of an art than a science. Like you're taking different perspectives. Like we're having my kid, and one of the nurses in there was like, "I've heard of this new technique," and it's like that does that does, like it worked, and it was like very like that. Or they're just parts of it that so much. It is still at the end of the day human. And yeah, you're right. And it's, sometimes you have to tell clients like a shit outcome is not negligence. And that's a hard thing to explain and a hard thing for people to understand.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. And by the way, I think I've had two babies too, and L&D nurses, for the most part, are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, it is. It's like the way that it is an art, and you have to constantly keep updated on literature and new techniques.
Hmm.
And is there a safer way of doing this? Maybe they were put in an unsafe situation depending on
Yep.
staffing, and was it a system-wide failure? Because you can go down the list and say there's a system-wide failure, there was nursing, it was a physician. And what I've learned too is look at like the bigger picture, because it, from what trial of attorneys have said too, is juries, they are empathetic to staff. They are empathetic to nurses and physicians. Man, I just learned so much over years of talking to
Sure.
you guys. But so, Damon, with one of the cases in mind that was like the most complex, most challenging, what did you, your team, how'd you guys approach that? And then what were there strategy shifts? If you can think of a case in mind, like strategy that shifted, turning points, or key moments of
Sure.
collaboration that just stand out in your head.
With explaining a complex medical issue, I don't know if it's oversimplified to say it, but you have to think first, how can I make this as simple as possible? If you're talking about, I try to use none of the words we've been using, right? Like a radiculopathy, right? Like you don't want to use any in the complaint. You want to use, like, sure, to an insurance adjuster and folks like that, you need to, but the picture first needs to be simplifying it, and and then from there, simplifying it more, right? Whatever, you're going to have a jury that's going to be people who might be fresh out of college, want to understand, people who have no medical background, anything like that. So it starts from there, and then it's finding the way to tell the story. And then also at the same point, it's just putting the context of, here's what our story is at the start. What do we think as the complaint is filed? That's the base story. And then from there, it's what do we learn from the case? And so it's finding, I think you got to look for the piss off factor, because as much as I think, especially like I haven't done medical malpractice as much lately. When I used to do it, you have to think, yeah, sure, we can't blame the nurses because people are going to recognize in COVID and they're going to see all that. But the system-wide failure, what's going to make people mad? Like I looked at a case recently where I was like, I think that this person got hurt and I think this should have been fixed. But is the piss off factor be people going, they caused it to themselves? And so you have to find that context of what's going to, and not to say that's right. There's sometimes people are harmed and there's something you wish you could do. But if you can't explain it to a jury and nobody's ever going to buy it, you're doing them a disservice by putting it forward. So I try and simplify it as much as possible. Try and put in the context of how can I tell a story, because people prefer to hear more. You'll want to tell about your client's story, but they'll want to know a lot more about the other person who harmed them. They'll want to know, they need a good story, needs a villain. And so whether right or wrong, it's finding that who's the problem and then building that story from there, right? This doctor who, in that case we talked about earlier, this doctor who just wasn't there, right? He wasn't in town. We never got him. The case was able to resolve. It's like, where were you that day? What were you doing that day? Why weren't you in the office when you're supposed to be? Why? And then also the same point from there, the system failure of, you have no knowledge of where you're supposed to be. You've done no background checks. And so all those things of, okay, mistakes happen. People understand people making mistakes. But I think on this side of it, people don't understand as much a company who makes a lot of money not spending $5,000 to fix a hole in the ground or a pipe in the ground or something like that. People don't buy that. And I think that's where a lot of the cases are. To get simple, but also sometimes that simplicity is made clear by the other side just being jackasses.
Yeah, and I think some of the like what that just brought up one of the cases we did too. It was transferring from hospital to hospital
Mm,
within these bigger companies or bigger systems where they have 10, 20 hospitals or urgent cares. You're looking at like on-call schedules and or questioning, why was the on-call doc not called in? Or why did
hmm.
another doctor come in and not the on-call one? And you're starting to think about that, just like you said, on system-wide failures. You're just like, what was in place to ensure that?
Mm,
Questions just get bigger, and then you start finding out it really doesn't like solely lie on the provider. Like they were stuck in a tough spot, and then you climb the climb up to bigger
sure.
issues. I often hear that failure is our greatest teacher. What was one of your greatest failures, or just one of your failures that kind of changed how you approach cases today, especially as a young one?
I think we talked a little bit about, I think it was like this, like prestige chasing and thinking less of what I wanted. And I think now it allowed me to see some perspective from the defense side and some assessment of the cases. Now, I don't think I did a great job at seeing that because I don't think I bought a lot of the BS on that side. But I think the failure was that I worried. I went to law school to help people, and then I think I kind of lost my way a little bit. But I think my failure was not seeing that soon enough, and like, right, insanity over and over again. I kept trying the same thing, expecting different results. And then two, I think failures along the way of like just little things of I think a lot of the time we can fail a client by letting their case sit for too long. The longer that a case sits, the longer that you can't make activity, the more that's beneficial. Insurance prefers that. And at least in the context of personal injury cases, like looking back on one of the first cases I worked, I don't I didn't know what I know now. And of course, looking back to them, like I wouldn't have handled it. Like I got thrown into it, and but the client got the exact same amount they would have gotten 4 years later. They got that. They could have had that within 6 months. If I knew now, sure, I wasn't trained on some things, but I think I got it like looking back and like I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And so the failure of having that and not reaching out for questions, I think were things I was new to. And the folks I would have thought to reach out to didn't also know the answer. And
Yeah.
like looking back, like I feel bad about, did I put somebody in a position that I jumped into the case, right? I wasn't there at the start, so I can't blame myself for that part of it. But looking back at the failure that I got handed a hot potato, and the client wasn't happy, and right, that's not where I want to be. And so, what the best thing I can do is learn from that now. It's okay. The best I can do is I can bother an attorney, or I can, hey, we're going to do this if you don't do this. I start setting timelines and standards, because otherwise, the defense, if they don't have to pick up the file, they won't. It's a lot easier to not work than it is to work. And so, if I can set up timelines for people to do that, I sure try and do it.
Yeah. When you first started as a young attorney, and now that you're doing it, obviously more and more years pass, do you feel like you've had to learn more about the psychological part of juries and when you present or in deposition questions?
I mean, I think I like to, after a deposition, I did this the other day. I think something I wouldn't have thought right early on is that you think you know everything because you're the attorney. And sometimes getting the opinion of somebody, just like focus grouping, doesn't have to be me hiring a room of people. It can be me talking to somebody who knows, like I will ask court reporters after a deposition, what did you think? What do you
Mm,
think of this case? What you know now? And they're like, I don't know that much. I'm like, yeah, actually, that's exactly the type of person I need.
yeah.
And so seeing that outside perspective in a way is incredibly invaluable, because I think sometimes we can miss the forest of the trees. And of course, any attorney who pretends they're unbiased is bullshitting themselves, because that's the job. And if I can find a way to put the case forward and put it in the hands of somebody, and hey, what do you think about this? They're asking. I had a case recently, I wasn't sure, and I talked to some of my friends. Here's what and they're not lawyers. I was like, what do you think about this? And I had a hunch what they would say, and it was what I thought. And it was like, this probably isn't the case. I can't do a good job for the client. And that was not my first assessment component, but it was also like looking later on, let me just get one more confirmation this isn't the case for me. And so
But
finding different ways to, you have to get out of your lawyer brain, and you have to simplify as much as possible. The point of, if we're using, like it goes back to, if we're using the big words and troponin, and I don't know who said it, but it's like, you're explaining, you're losing. And so if you're spending a ton of time explaining what are probably very basic medical things, I have to find a way to make it as pictures, images, anything to put it in that simplest context for somebody to go, oh, because I think everybody's learned better from an image, or at least understand. Whereas me rambling on about troponin scores, and I don't think that does the picture as well.
yeah. One of the attorneys that I talked to, Attorney Tolan, he said he's got his own animation. And he said for one of his cases, to explain, I think it was like bowel perforation or something complex with the belly in a med mal case, he said the animation is what helped our case. And one,
Hmm.
because he said it was complex, but when you dumb it, he said exactly what you said. He said, if you're over explaining, you've already lost.
Hmm.
And actually, every attorney so far that I've talked to, they said you have to simplify it. You have to simplify it. And Daniel, that
I'll say real quick, sorry, because I want to. It's like a picture's worth 1,000 words, but an attorney can poorly explain something with more than 1,000 words, and people still won't understand.
do you use focus groups for yours?
I have sometimes. My firm is, I'll be frank, like my firm is 6 months out, and so I haven't had to yet, but I definitely have used them before. But
Yeah.
sometimes the focus group doesn't have to be. It can be talking to some, if you're in public, if I can ask a stranger, hey, I have a case. Now, not some people will think I'm loony, but if I could get a chance to talk to somebody, or ask a couple questions of my barber, or
Mhm.
you feel pretty strong about something, but sometimes it's easy to go, oh, I had missed that, or maybe you're overcomplicating things.
Yeah. One of the earliest cases that I've reviewed, the attorney said, I just have a gut feeling. Do you have gut feelings about cases? And do you go all in when you have a gut feeling, or do you get it gut checked with someone that has more expertise in maybe the medical area or trucking or slip and falls or anything like that?
Both. I think I've had both. Like you have a gut feeling about a case. From the biggest case I ever resolved, when the client called, I had a feeling, like I was like, I knew this was going to be something. And I've I haven't had a lot of feelings like that, but it was a good case. I more than anything, like we created a good relationship, and it was like that was like a beautiful thing to me. Whereas getting gut checked, first off, opposing attorney always wants to make you feel dumb. As a woman in a hospital, I doubt you. I bet you've experienced plenty of times somebody trying to learn you or teach you that they know better. And attorneys are no different. I love the line of I've never seen this in my whatever 100 years of
Oh
practice.
yeah.
Glad I can show you something new today. And so that can be the gut check of being able to stand up and saying, I know what I'm talking about here. Or sometimes the gut check can be like you think. I remember looking at a case once, the client told me the story. And sometimes that's where any case starts is the client telling you the story. Or you getting it from someone else? And there was a case once where I was like, I got it. I think we got a good story here. And we went to an expert and we could not get support for it. And at the same point, I think of another case where and I guess I had another gut feeling here. We went to the case. That was a good case. Call the expert, say, please do not prepare a report. Please do not do anything. And give me a call. So he spends 4 hours preparing a report saying our case is shit. It's awful. And I was like, you shouldn't have done that. And I don't know why, but I was like, we need to get another opinion. And I was new enough that I shouldn't have said that. We got another opinion. The opinion was supported. Like it was like this other guy was more experienced. It was better. He would have been able to better talk to people. And we, at the time, was my biggest resolution for a client. I was like, I guess looking back, and I'm like, I don't know why. I was like, we need another expert. I never hesitated on that. So I don't even know if I thought of it as a gut feeling. I was like, I just know there's a case here. Whereas other times I've gotten like, I just don't think
Yeah.
that one expert opinion can be like, I hadn't thought of it that way, or maybe I don't know the medicine well enough there.
Damon, so you've had your own practice for about 6 months.
Yep.
Okay. What made you go out on your own versus working for another firm?
I'm not the type who like, oh, I always dreamed of this. I didn't.
Yeah.
I guess I have some entrepreneurial spirit in that I've tried things and I'm not like, but I guess at a job I was at that was a good job is working out. I kept bringing in cases and I kept bringing in clients and I kept resolving these cases and I kept not seeing the same amount. And I was like, I can do some of these things differently. I can be at home more with my kid. I can have more flexibility. I can try the weird cases or I can make mistakes in a way that plenty of times like I have a case right now where the other attorney's mad at me. I'm like, well, the only person who's going to get in trouble with this is me with me. And so I think starting some of the what's it the line of some good trouble and doing some things like the old bosses would have said I don't necessarily like that I would prefer to do. I like to be during COVID. My wife once said, "Is it your job all day to be a pest?" And it kind of is, right? Sometimes it's like you need to following up on this and following up on that. And so sometimes doing things in a way that some people will, like I said, they would let sit for a long time out of professional courtesy. Whereas at the end of the day, my professional courtesy requires more my client. And so I think, yes, right. I had my last job. I left with things in it on good terms. It was good, but it just became time. The stuff just started adding up going, I need to do this. And it's been great. I'm fairly certain we'll have a year two and I'm busy. So
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel there's just some people that have that entrepreneurial spirit, I guess you can say, and I know that I can do this. And that's why when I founded US Legal Nurse Consultants,
mm,
there was always opportunities for me to work with other people. But there was just something gnawing at me. And I'm like, I know I can do something big. You know what
mm,
I mean? And I think we can relate on that too. I don't know. Someone said something to me a couple months ago that just struck with me, and they're like, "You can't make an impact if you're invisible." She didn't even know me. She just commented on a post. I was like, "Gosh, that's good." And
yeah,
you putting yourself out there on LinkedIn and people resonating with them, that takes courage. And for me, it's just reps, 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 and like trying those weird cases, like you said, like it matters. And improvement stacks on that, and then greatness
hmm
follows. And Damon Hudson has his own law firm, and one, the flexibility and freedom was a huge thing for me. It's you to be at home with your kid, and it's business owners do the boring stuff, and we do
yeah,
the things that following up and the emails and admin days and everything like that. But that's what it takes. You work in the dark. You like nobody sees that crap that we're doing in the dark.
yep.
But there's part of it. That's what feeds my purpose. That's what feeds what I want to do. And so I can't wait to see where you grow in
Well,
one to
thank you.
5 years. And I hope to reconnect after that and just be like,
Yeah,
dude, Damon, do you remember that call where we talked about it? What's up?
yeah.
Look at you now. So, Damon, and we might be too early in it, but this mini series is called The Legal Edge. What's something that you have done that's elevated your practice or given an edge? Obviously, AI is big out there. I don't know if you're starting to integrate AI or maybe strategy or processes with colleagues or if you have paralegals, but something that's helped you practice more effectively, connect with people better, or serve your clients more powerfully.
I don't think I don't think I've reinvented the wheel in a lot of things. I definitely use AI heavily. If I can get it to start something off, I will. I try not to waste time on things I've done 10 times.
Yeah.
If I can automate any process, I try and do it right then. I have a case manager and she's been fantastic. And so having somebody to do some of the stuff that I don't want to do anymore. And it's not that I'm above it, but it's like I can focus more on the cases of the things that I can better do. And so doing that, I think I'll probably have an office space at some point, but I still prefer to go to people if I can go to where they are. Like I have a client right now who's gotten back to me in a while. I'm like, oh, I got to go to her house. Like she's not answering my call. And so sometimes I try to be, maybe this is more New Mexican. I met a client today and I was wearing jeans. I try to be, I don't want to wear a suit every day. If I can avoid it as long as possible, I will, but I'd rather be more human. And so I think that's my hope with some of the stuff I try and do is that it's more as natural as it can be. And I'm like, it's not being afraid to fail. And like, you talk about LinkedIn, I just started posting on there because I heard it was a good opportunity. I was like, nobody else in New Mexico is doing it. If it's a good opportunity right now, it won't be forever. And so I still don't see a ton of people doing it. And so I think I try and put myself out in areas that maybe are sure in other states inundated, right? I've done more posts on shorts, but there's not a lot of people doing that in my state. And so trying to take open areas, but like to think, I don't know if I've done anything that's like totally reinvented the wheel or totally brand new, but it's sometimes finding and doing the things work well or testing things out that fail. But yeah, yeah, of course I use AI and I think if you're not, you're foolish. But
Even like I've been working alongside or testing different AI to automation. Business owners, if you can automate things, like
Mhm.
that's how you're going to become successful because of course nobody's above anything, but there's also you need to be in a certain spot and you're going to fill in those other things that can be done to other
Mhm.
people where like you need to be the face and the head of your firm and you can't be doing other things that can be automated. Yeah, AI, like one of the phrases that I hear over and over is if you don't use AI, you're going to be the blockbuster of Netflix and you're going to be left behind. It's just simple. And if you're not integrating that stuff, you're crazy. So you can put your head in the sand or you can take it and find what can make your practice better. And also, do you watch Suits?
No, I started it and so like all he
When
was
you said that you went to your
I'll tell you why
client's
I don't like
house,
Suits. Tell me if you like The Pit because that's the medical show I like. And so I feel like Suits was the fact that he was practicing without a bar. I was like, this is just so far-fetched. Like I could not suspend my disbelief. We watched how to get the craziest one we watched was How to Get Away with Murder, which like I started before law school,
yeah.
and I think I couldn't have watched it had if I had watched it later because it's also just bizarre.
Bizarre, yeah. I think that with like even like Grey's Anatomy, I love it,
Sure.
'cause the drama and stuff like that. But you're like, really, dude? Like you intubated just like that, huh? Like, but
Yes.
when you said that you went to your client's house, that was really cool just to hear that because one, it reminded me of Sue's because they're always knocking on doors and stuff. But I don't think a lot of attorneys do that too. And I know the busier firms get and the busier attorneys get,
Sure.
it's harder too. But the fact that I think your edge too is still being personable and wearing jeans and connecting with them person to person. You don't live like in a good what do they call it good old boy state, New Mexico or your area.
It's rural, like it's very, I wouldn't say good old boys, like in that regard, but it's very like of its own. And so, but at the same point, like, right, the first word in what my profession
Yeah,
is
yeah,
personal injury. And so if you take it like, sure, there are big firms that make it a metric and they can churn a case through real quick, but that's not what I want to be. I'm not competing with them. That's not like I can, if I can be personal and I can meet your
yeah.
dog and I can know your kid's name and you, I'll tell you about myself. Like I had a client recently yesterday, I got a text from a client. She is very religious. I am openly very much not. And that didn't change she asked about it and I told her, it's not for me. And we had and she sent me the most endearing message. She was like, no, you're not, but if you ever need someone to pray for you, I'd be happy to do it. I was like, what a kind way to offer something. She wasn't like in my face about it, but it's so sweet. And it's like, she wouldn't have offered that to me had we not had a relationship, but it absolutely meant the world to me. And so like sometimes that if it's not personal and they are just a metric and you never talk to them, and
Mhm.
sure, you can make sure plenty of people make good money doing that, but that's not what I want.
Yeah. Kurt London said the same thing. He said almost what you said too. He said, person null is in personal injury. And he said, A lot of us are 99% of us is the David versus Goliath. And he said, I am not in the business to be a quantity. I'm in it for quality. And I am in it to make relationships with my clients and make it personable and connect with them. And I'm not here to churn and burn kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I love talking to you guys about that too. In your experience, what's one of the most overlooked factors that can change the trajectory of a personal injury case or med mal?
I think sometimes just even knowing the insurance and like the basics or like reading the policy that's applicable. I think from there, seeing what the other side has and not being afraid to push and prod. I think sometimes it's easy, especially when you have a lot of cases, it's easy to let things slip through the cracks and to miss little pieces of information that you can press on. And so I think that a lot of people will miss to let things that maybe this is part of my state or some of the people I'm thinking of, but they'll miss and allow things to take time and they'll do what it takes to not push things. But then at the same point, the other thing I think a lot of places miss is the communication. And that what they, I don't know if it creates a makes the case worth more or less, but it makes the relationship worth more. And so if I have some time in the block this afternoon, then I call clients because it's been about a month and I try and set some time aside each week because I contact people once a month. And so even if it's just, sometimes it's like, hey, what's going on? Just letting you know, not a big change, but that's sometimes how it goes. They understand that. And at the same point, plenty of firms I have clients who are like, I hadn't heard from my attorney for 6 months. So that's insane. Is it out of value? Probably because you learn more stuff, right? You just talking to them, but it definitely doesn't hurt the case and it definitely makes the relationship more worthwhile.
Damon, so where can people learn more about you, your firm, if they'd like to connect?
I think, yeah, my LinkedIn, HudsonInjuryLaw.com. I've been trying to post more as attorney Damon on TikTok, YouTube, and link or an Instagram. And so I think there, but at the same point, I don't know, come on down to New Mexico. I guess we can grab a coffee. But one of my things I try and do that's been really good for cases is just going to get coffees with other attorneys. Plenty of times people pass on something that I find a win in. So that's been yeah, but I've tried to be on the internet. I try to be present enough and have a decent enough footprint that's positive.
Yeah. Your stuff's working every time you're on and post something. The comments and the likes and stuff, it's working. So keep it up. I think you're doing a really good job.
Well,
And
thank
so,
you. Of
Damon, seriously, appreciate you getting on. This was a
course. Thank you.
great call. And I hope to do this again in a couple of years or a
Yeah.
couple of months and just see the growth of you and your practice.
Same to you.
Yeah. Appreciate you, Damon. Have a good rest of your day.
See you, Alex. Bye bye.
Hey, if this episode changed the way you think or gave words to something that you already practice, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you know someone who makes high stake decisions, maybe solves complex problems and works in gray areas, send this episode their way. Between the Lines is for people who care about how judgment actually works. We'll see you on the next one.